Hi, it's Michael Senoff with Michael Senoff's HardToFindSeminars.com. You know, on my site I've got lots of interviews on how to buy a business and lots of interviews on how to grow an existing business. But here's one that will show you how to position your business best for sale. It's with a leading expert and recognized authority on how to sell your business. This interview is 45 minutes long. You're going to hear a wonderful story on how he's helping others sell their businesses for more. Get ready and enjoy. Look, take me back to the beginning. How did it all start with these assisted centers? Did you have a family member or something that you experienced it firsthand?
No. It goes back even further. It goes back to I used to be a financier, used to be a banker, basically, banker, financier. And the company I worked for, we used to finance all different types of businesses. We used to finance retail businesses. We used to finance leisure, restaurants and clubs. We used to finance, obviously, assisted living centres, nursing homes, care homes, and investments. And so I did that for about 8 years. And so I got to see a whole range of different types of businesses. And I knew at some point I wanted to do my own thing. And so I chose to go into the assisted living centre market because there was great opportunity. Although I knew regulation was about to come into the marketplace, there was still enormous opportunity in terms of two things. One, there was enormous profits in it, and two, they were mainly what I call mom and pop businesses, and there was very little what I call professionalism and systems. Exactly.
Did you finance some of these?
Yeah. At that time I was working for a finance house, so yeah, we were financing them. But I was travelling all around the UK, seeing the good, the bad and the ugly, really. Not only in that sector, but in other sectors, but I made a decision I wanted to get into that sector because I saw great opportunity. So in the end, myself, I bought one of the homes. I bought a home eventually, and then I bought a second home myself.
How many people could it occupy?
The first home I bought was registered for 30, and then the second home I bought a year later was for 28. And then at the same time I was looking around, these homes, even in those assisted living centres as you would call them, even in those days they were expensive to buy, they were capital intensive. So even in those days they were probably, in US terms, they were between $1 and $1.5 million. Sometimes two, even in those days. So I had a choice. I'd got a couple of homes and I was doing okay, but I wanted to grow quicker. And so I looked around for someone with more money than me. And then I found an investor who was interested in getting into this sector. And rather than buying something, he wanted to start something up from scratch. So for about a year and a half, we negotiated a kind of a deal. They would put the money in, and I would guarantee them a return, and they would give me a stake of the company, and I would run it basically and give them the return. And so we had an idea about over 5 years we would get to 10 homes in 5 years, and we had kind of a plan. And that's roughly what we did. I still had my other two centres as well, which were nothing to do with the group, and I still was running those businesses all the time. But with these investors, we created a group to build and create and develop and do something significant over, a relatively short period.
As a financer, you saw firsthand what made a good business. You had to look for strict things within the business that you could make a decision to loan this business money.
Correct, exactly.
Now, what were some of the big mistakes you were seeing when people came in and wanted money for their business?
The mistakes were, in England we have this expression, people were rose-tinted. Do you have that expression, rose-tinted? They see things through rose-tinted glasses. Yeah, exactly. So because you were going into a care industry, quite rightly, they wanted to care for the patients, for the residents, for their clients, but there was very little financial acumen involved. There was very little commercial kind of perspective. And so whilst they had good intentions, often that's all they were good intentions. And so there was no planning, there was no marketing, there was no systems. It was just totally ad hoc. And they will provide good care and the money will follow and everything will be fine. And sometimes that was true, but often it wasn't. When we were lending to people, we're lending to people who had obviously good intentions, but also had some kind of greater commercial perspective on the deal. So we knew we would get paid back as well. So in those days, it was really, as I said, it was mom and pop businesses. Often you used to find people who were qualified nurses would get fed up of working in the NHS and then they wanted to do their own thing, so they would go into and buy a care home of some description, but they had no idea of what it took to be self-employed and actually run a business.
Right. So you could see what the industry was doing, and you, coming from your background, knew you had to have an exit strategy because you had a financer. So what was it that you did that gave you this increased value when Deloitte and Touche evaluated. You know, what are some of the things you did in your business that allowed you to sell it for top dollar?
There were many things. The first was building a team of people. I mean, that's the first point. You need to create and build a team, so the business wasn't exclusively dependent. I drove the business, but I had a team of people under me. I had managers, the directors, and I had a team that I trained them and I gave them the values, and the vision was emanated from myself. But that required a lot of training and supervision and time spent with a number of people over a period of time. So first you have to have a vision. I had a greater vision. I knew strategically, right at the very beginning, how I wanted the centres to be. So for example, one of the things were that all the centres were an hour from my house, so we weren't dotted all around the UK. We were reasonably local, and so it was relatively easy to manage. The second critical point is that the centres were the most expensive. And again, that was done on purpose. So on average, people, if they choose a centre, they go and visit 3 centres. A relative, if their mum needs to go into a assisted living centre, into a care home, they on average go and visit 3. And so I wanted them to go and visit 3. I wanted us to be the most expensive. I didn't want to argue about price. I mean, we were obviously going to deliver greater value for that in terms of facilities, in terms of training, in terms of the care we provided. But I wasn't in a commodity business. I wanted to completely differentiate myself.
In the research you did, you knew that the market could sustain a premium price?
Yes, because it varied from locality to locality, but I knew that when I bought centres, I did obviously my research and checked that the market could bear a private, you know, at expensive rates. So that was also one of the reasons.
What did it cost, say, a couple per?
Well, for example, at the end, the average fee per week would be £300, $600. That would be kind of an industry norm. Yet our average fee was, in English, it was $374, so it would be times that by 2, so it's $740 or something of that description.
Per week?
Yeah, per week.
Did insurance cover any of this?
No. Essentially, the care market is split into 2 types of people. Either you're private, in which case it's not the insurance that pay, it's just people's assets pay. Either they've sold the house and they've got investments, or they've built up investments over the years, and those investments pay for the care. So those are the private payers, and then there's a rate which the government pay, which obviously is a really poor rate, and that varies from area to area, but there's often a big distinction between what a private person would pay and what a person from the state or from the government would pay.
You're listening to an exclusive interview found on Michael Senoff's HardToFindSeminars.com. With the universal health care there, the government would take care of someone if they
couldn't afford it.
If they couldn't afford it.
Yeah, correct. The rule was, if you had less than $40,000, the government would step in. Was it
subpar care?
No, care is care.
Care is care.
Care is care. The only thing where we would differentiate, so that if someone was paying $600 or $700 or $800, the only thing we would differentiate is on the facilities. So they would have better facilities in the room they had. They would have ensuite rooms. They had rooms. We had lovely gardens, so they would have rooms with a view and stuff like that. But care is care. You know, you can't differentiate. A carer will provide care to anyone, whether they're state-funded or whether they're private.
So you had a premium price. Did you justify that price to your clients, or?
Completely. We explained where people could afford it, you know, why we were most expensive, and like I said, because we invested enormous amounts in the facilities, so that a lot of the rooms and the general facilities, the kitchen facilities, the bathroom facilities, their own facilities, were of extremely high standard. A lot of our centres had wonderful gardens, so again, people could look at that. And also, another significant thing is, in everything we did, we always beat the industry average. So, for example, the government said that your staff had to be at least either 25% qualified or 50% qualified in some way. So whenever there was a number, we always beat that number. So, for example, if it was 50%, we were always at 75 or 80 or 90%. Or if it was at 25%, we were always at 50% or 60%. So we were always beating every number in the industry.
You were doing this for a reason, all for that exit strategy?
Totally, because that's how you run a business. So, for example, there's always 2 or 3 key numbers to any industry. So in the assisted living centre, there's 2 key numbers. The first number is, are you filling your beds? what's your occupancy rate? How are you filling your beds? And the industry average at that time was 89.3%, whereas our occupancy, our statistic was in excess of 97% year on year, not just 1 year, year on year. So we were completely beating the industry statistic by, considerable margin every year.
All right, now hold on, let me interrupt. Let's take you back to you're a financier.
Yeah.
When you see that number, what does that mean playing the banker's hat? When you see a stat like that and you see you're above average, what does that mean to you?
The industry norm is fine, and there are those below industry norm, in which case those are the businesses that have difficulty, and then there's those that are at or close to the industry norm, and those businesses are ticking along and paying the bank back and they're earning reasonable money, but that's okay. As I said right at the very beginning, I wanted to completely differentiate the business that I was associated with, and I wanted to completely make it stand out, make it marketable, completely differentiate myself. So I knew whatever the industry stat was, I had to beat it, and I had to beat it by a significant margin, which is what I did.
And the evidence behind that number are your systems, your business systems.
Correct, because, for example, if the average is 89.3, the occupancy, filling the beds, and my industry stat year on year is in excess of 90%, how do you do that? Well, you do that. It doesn't happen by magic. It happens by brilliant training, brilliant marketing, being completely innovative in what you're doing. And that's what I was. And so I won an industry award. I won a marketing award. Like every industry has its Oscars ceremony. In the industry, I was quite high profile. And I won a marketing award because of what I was doing and my stats. So that was one stat. The second stat was that in the care industry, the critical stat is margin. What's your net profit? And at that time, the average net profit was roughly between 22 and 25% net. Okay. But again, the business that I was involved in was in excess of 30% year on year. So those are the two industry stats. I knew what the stats were, and I knew what I had to beat, and year on year I beat those stats. And you say, why did I sell for top dollar? Well, those are some of the reasons why. You set the business up, you know what the industry stat is, and then you set out a business, you create the business to beat those stats. And then people want to buy you because you're way above the norm. You're completely different.
I got you. So how many facilities did you build it up to?
At the peak, we had 12, and then when I sold, we got rid of 1 or 2, and there was 10. And then I also had a further 2 centres as well in my own right. But in the group, we had 12 at the peak.
Were there other centers that had that many, but just not high-end?
Yes, absolutely. No, in relative terms, we were small. We were a small player. Say the top 10 players, massive companies, they had thousands and thousands of beds. So, in relative terms, we had 350, 400 beds. So we were still a really quite small player. We were not a major player in the marketplace in terms of someone who had 3,000 or 5,000 beds. We were just a relatively small, what I call regional player.
But you had in your mind the business sold before you started it.
Completely.
Did you have an idea who was going to buy it? You knew a big one was going to buy it.
I knew either a big one was going to buy it or someone bigger than myself. If you've got a home with 300 beds, then someone with either 1,000 beds or 3,000 beds or 5,000 beds will be interested in buying you.
So at what point did you know it's time to sell, and why at that point?
I knew it was time to sell because I gave myself a time frame, and so I built it up over about 6 or 7 years, and then I saw the market was beginning to what I call peak in terms of timing. And so at that point, I then thought, right, I've given it my all, I've given it like 7 or 8 years. The numbers are, in terms of the valuations, are coming good. And I think the market, the industry is beginning to turn around, and it's actually beginning to peak.
Hi, it's Michael Sinoff with HardToFindSeminars.com. Thanks for watching this video. Many of my interviews last 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, sometimes even up to 2.5 hours long. They're actual mini seminars, and you've just listened to a short sample of just one of over 117 hours of exciting, hard-hitting, mind-blowing interviews on how to make money in direct mail, advertising, copywriting. I assure you, there is not a resource anywhere on the internet or on the planet that comes close to the free information I provide at HardToFindSeminars.com. So go right now to HardToFindSeminars.com, and you'll have free access to 117 hours of audio interviews with typed word-for-word downloadable transcripts and downloadable MP3 files. Please browse some more of the videos or go right directly to HardToFindSeminars.com. Thanks for watching.